This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm your host, Steve Gould. Thank you for joining me. It's great to have you. This is episode number 76. It's a very special episode. It's a crossover episode, a crossover podcast. It is my appearance on the Police Applicant podcast. It's hosted by my good friends Ken Roybal and Christine Roof. I met Ken. You've probably heard the story, but he's actually been on this podcast before, telling his war stories. But I met Ken in LAPD backgrounds. He was part of the inspiration for this show, getting the stories out there so people could have a better appreciation for these men and women do on the job. He was LAPD for 20 plus years, and he's also a background investigation expert. So he has a podcast. In that podcast, he is the host, and Christine Roof is his co-host. Christine is a good friend of ours, and she's in the process of becoming a police officer. So it's just a fantastic idea for a podcast, and it's really, really fun to listen to. I've listened to all the episodes. I can tell you it's great. I know a lot of the listeners for this podcast are new officers or officers, or I should say candidates trying to become officers. So it's just, super valuable for you listening to it. And it's just entertaining if you're already on the job, or if you just want like a peek into the process that police officers go through to become police officers. It's kind of crazy, and it's a lot. It takes a lot to become a police officer. And I think his podcast is just fantastic and entertaining, and really helps people have an appreciation for what these men and women go through. They have episodes on there. They have an episode on the polygraph, on the oral interview. They have an episode called You Lie and You Die. There's an episode dedicated to social media, do's and don'ts, prepping for the academy. And they even have a drill instructor from the academy giving his perspective, which is it's just fun to listen to. Hear what goes through these guys' head. I really love that one. And of course, the episode you're about to hear, the DQ, which of course stands for disqualification. So I worked at police backgrounds for LAPD for a couple of years, and Ken was kind of a mentor of mine at backgrounds. And we just go through the different scenarios and things that can get you disqualified while applying to be a police officer. It's a fun episode. I had an absolute blast. I think the component where we have Christine on, who's like actively applying to agencies and going through this, it's just a really fun listen to have a set of eyes like that on the process, reporting back to her experience. So I'm really happy and proud to present this podcast, because I think it's that good, and I think you should go to iTunes and you should subscribe and like it and give them all the support you can, because I don't know if you noticed, there's a nationwide shortage of police officers. So this podcast does nothing but help candidates get where they need to be to get accepted by an agency, and it's so needed, guys. We just are struggling to fill the ranks, rightfully so. City police officers are leaving in droves. We can't replace them. They're just judged so harshly and unfairly by the media and politicians. It's just ridiculous. So this podcast really helps arm the candidate with what they need to know to get in, and it will inform the public on what these folks have to go through. So without further ado, this is my appearance on the Police Applicant podcast with Ken Roybal and Christine Roof. I hope you like it.
Podcasting live from the offices of policebackground.net. This is the Police Applicant Podcast with your host, Ken Roybal.
What's happening, everybody? Here we are with the Police Applicant Podcast, episode 9. Episode 9 for real.
Are you sure it's episode 9?
I'm looking right at the thing right now. So it's episode 9. And today's podcast is going to be about how to get DQ'd. What are the things that you need to look out for in order to not get DQ'd? And I always say this every week, but this is going to be a special episode. And Christine, what's happening?
Nothing much. I'm excited because we have our best good friend on today.
We have a special guest. This guest is more specialer than anybody. It's more specialer than anybody. So today's special guest is one of my partners in crime, and we're working backgrounds, back in doing LAPD backgrounds, Mr. Steve Gould from Things Police See podcast. Steve, what is happening out there in the Massachusetts?
Ken and Christine, thanks for having me. It's gray, it's a little rainy, it's getting humid, but besides that, it's good.
Good.
It's 91 degrees here.
Wow.
91. I'm not at 91. But I got
That's your spring.
I got a special story, a special intro story about Steve. I wish I had some intro story music. But anyways, I met Steve. When did we meet, Steve?
2017.
2017. In 2017, everyone, Steve and his family lived in Massachusetts. They jumped in a covered wagon and made their way out. Go west, young man, go west. So him and his family came out to California, ended up in Los Angeles. And, the luck of the Scottish, or is it Irish? Scottish or Irish?
Either or.
One of the other. And he ended up at Backgrounds, and everybody loved him. And then we hooked up and hung out. And then he started the Things Police See podcast, and which he let me co-host with him. I was his water boy for, I think, probably about a year or so. And then Steve made his way back to Massachusetts, and there he is now. And so Christine and I are graced with his presence. And if you guys have not listened to the Things Police See podcast, you should head right over there on Apple Podcasts. So Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself so the audience knows who you are.
Yeah, like you said, I was a police officer. Well, you didn't say this, but I was a police officer in law enforcement for 14 years out east. Then we went west, California dreaming, I guess you'd say. And we landed there, landed in a campground in San Dimas, had no jobs. I had applied to backgrounds like 7 months earlier and heard nothing. And within a couple of weeks of being there, I heard from backgrounds. And somehow, some way, this small town cop from the East Coast landed an interview with LAPD backgrounds. I went in, and all I can think is they liked me. They just liked me in the interview, and they thought I didn't know anything about the police organization or how backgrounds was run. I'd never done a background investigation. I had no idea what the standards were. You're talking, I needed to be trained from the ground up. And somehow I convinced them in the interview that they should take a chance. And I think part of it was they thought it was neat that I was from a small agency that did their own investigations. Like a lot of patrolmen could take an investigation and run with it. So we only had 1 or 2 detectives, usually just one. And he was always burdened with everything, including court paperwork. So we could take our own cases and do interviews and bring people in and interrogations and all that. So they thought that was interesting. And they must've seen it in the desperation in my eye. It's always good to have someone who's willing to do almost anything.
Steve just went in there with you recited the quote from Dumb and Dumber. We got no food. We got no jobs. Our pets' heads are falling off.
Exactly. I had a parrot with no head.
They hired you.
Exactly.
You brought in PD.
I think they were afraid. I told them all their home addresses, and then they just hired me.
They just hired you.
So Ken is part of the inspiration for TPS because we would, my field trainer ended up being a good friend of mine too, Pat, and he's a retired captain from Covina. And he told, as it was explained to him, his supervisor said, I got this new guy, you got to train, 0 experience. He's not even from the state. He's from the East Coast. He dabbles in stand-up comedy, and he's our new full-time guy. And Pat was like, what? Why did you hire this guy?
Why is he here again?
And Ken, I knew nothing about background investigation, nothing. He had to start like from the ground up. So I worked with him for, I think, two months longer. I think it was one of the longest field training periods in the history of the department. Pat was like, "You're not ready yet." So, but again, I ingratiated myself somehow to Pat, and Pat was good friends with Ken. And when we were in backgrounds, Pat, super knowledgeable and looked very highly at by management, upper management. And when Pat had a problem or question, he went to Ken. So Ken was kind of the answer man. Been doing backgrounds forever. A little intimidating. I didn't really know what to think of him. He was very quippy, quick with the comments, and But I remember Ken going out to the truck with you one day, and you looking at me and going, "What's your deal? Like, you're really this is it's very different what you did." You know, kind of like he's so direct. You know, just like it's interesting what you've done. You know, like
that's actually a pretty good impression.
Yeah, like you just like right, like what is your problem, kid? What are you doing here? And
what are you doing here?
Yeah, Ken and Pat kind of took me under their wing, and I actually think that's the only reason I had success there. You know, it's like it's hard to explain what it's like there, but it's a lot of retired or injured on the job guys who are doing backgrounds, and it's a wealth of knowledge. I mean, right next to me, the cubicle next to me was the supervising detective from the O.J. Simpson trial, and he was an awesome guy. And these guys are any one of these guys could have ran backgrounds, but none of them wanted to, was the point. So like when promotions came up, I said, "Hey, I got to feed a family. I need to go for lead investigator." And I got lead investigator. I got, I passed the promotion. I was about to be assigned my own team and the whole thing. And then I left for an insurance investigator job. It paid too well, but
very cool.
Ken, you took me under your wing at backgrounds, and I can't thank you enough. It was one of the great experiences of my life working there. It was awesome.
That was a cool place. So Steve knows background investigations, and I know background investigations, and Christine's going to have a background investigation. We all have something in common here. But what we want to talk about today is the things that can get you DQ'd, because a lot of people don't know exactly what, I get calls and people say, I'm wondering, I'm having thoughts about whether I can pass a background because of this, that, or the other thing. But there's a lot more than just this one thing. There's a bunch of stuff that a lot of people don't realize. There's lists of things. In California alone, they have what's called the California Post Job Dimensions. And then those are the basics. And then from there, each department can interpret these vague post-job dimensions. And I think it's the same with every agency. But then again, Steve and Christine, there are agencies that you apply to where they just look at you and they don't like you. And they don't have to like you, period.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. And so, but before we get started, I wanted to clear up the different types of quote unquote DQs, because a lot of people, they say they're DQ'd and they're not. And then so I want to talk about a little bit about DQs and non-selects and fails. So we know what we're talking about when we get into all of this. A DQ is a disqualification. You didn't meet some standards, so they disqualified you. A non-select is not a DQ. You can't appeal it. And it just means they didn't like you, and that's an easy way to get rid of you. They don't have to do a background or anything. They just non-select you. And the way you can tell if you've been technically DQ'd on paper or non-selected is they'll send you a letter saying, thank you for applying. We have gone with other candidates. You are not among our first choice, and we are not going to continue with your application. And that's a non-select. And then a fail is if you take the oral interview or whatever and you don't pass it. You can't go on in the process because you didn't pass something. So a non-select and a fail for a test is not a DQ. DQs normally are reserved for background investigations. So today, what we're going to talk about really are disqualifications. So we have a list of things that are kind of a big deal for backgrounds for most background agencies, and we'll just tackle them as we go. And Christine, we'll see how you feel about all these. I think Christine's going to get an eye opener today, Steve, because there's probably a lot more than she actually realizes. You can get DQ'd for a number of things just off the bat.
Ken, can I add one thing to your list? Because when you said to think about some DQ cases, and I started to think about like some of the more interesting DQs that I had. One of them, some of them are actually just strongly recommended withdrawals. I don't know if that applies to every agency, but it's more of like you like the candidate and you see something bad and you say, all right, I've made note of this. It's in their file. And you kind of tell them, why don't you remove yourself from the process for like a year? Because that was something I ran into a few times. I don't know if that's just LAPD or if that's all of them. I know the other people have non-select, so that's something we didn't have, it seems.
Yeah,
well, go ahead, Christine.
That's not something that I've ever heard of either. I mostly just heard about like, yeah, you're either disqualified or you can reapply at another point.
Inside baseball, maybe.
Yeah, Steve brings up a good point, because there's a lot of times when you may complete a personal history statement, a PHS, or you may just fill out a kind of a generic, 10 question form, and then they sit you down and they say, yeah, I think that you should withdraw.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah. It's kind of like that whole employment thing where you resign in lieu of. If you don't resign, we're going to fire you.
Exactly.
It's the same thing, right? So, so a lot of agencies will ask you to withdraw, because if you don't, they're going to disqualify you. And what you don't want is, you don't want to have a disqualification on your record. It's easier to withdraw, get some time and distance from whatever the problem is, and then apply again. That way you kind of go in there fresh. So that is a fourth thing, a withdraw. And if some agency highly suggests that you withdraw, then you should.
Yeah, because you will have candidates fight you. Be like, well, I don't think I should. Like, oh, you don't? Am I the background investigator? And now, are you the background investigator and I'm applying? I don't understand what you're saying, but okay. So,
well, I've had candidates that I've opened their file, and when you get to the background investigation, you've gotten pretty far. But when your background investigator opens your file, and I've been trying to do people some favors, man. I try and do them some favors to go, hey, listen, you've got this, and this in your background. You should, it might be something you might want to withdraw. And then they say, no, you know what? No, I think I'm going to go for it. I'm like, God. Okay. You're gonna get DQ'd, man. Okay, whatever you want to do. And then they end up getting DQ'd. But it's like I tried to help them in the first place, but no.
You're about to get Dairy Queened.
So, Dairy Queen, DQ.
That sounds so good right now.
Lizard.
Lizard. So we're going to go down this list, and Steve and I are going to come up with some stories of DQs. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with honesty, and we did an episode on this on You Lie, You Die. But honesty is still it's still something we need to talk about, because honesty is a huge deal. And a lot of candidates, they go in. I get asked frequently, you guys. I get asked, people call me. I got 2 calls this last week where they said, my police officer friend said that I should not disclose this. And I said, are you asking me whether you should lie or not? Because they're asking me outright. Mm-hmm. And I tell them the background investigators are going to find out no matter what. It's going to show up somewhere.
What type of stuff are they asking you that they should not disclose?
If they applied somewhere else and they put something down on their PHS, and then when they think, oh, okay, so this didn't happen and that didn't happen, so they probably won't find out that I applied at this agency. So what they're asking is, should I put this agency down that I got DQ'd at?
Yeah. Because
I got DQ'd there, and I don't want them to know I got DQ'd, but it shouldn't show up anywhere.
It's like they're gonna find out.
Yeah, I think applicants should know that a lot of the background investigators I work with are very proud of the agency they work for, and whether they're active or they're retired, and they protect it. So, and these guys, most of them have like 20 plus years experience as a police officer. So they're going to find this stuff. They know all the ins and outs. They know everybody in the game. They already know the background investigators at other agencies. Like, it's so dumb to do that. It's like, these aren't just normal. It's not a normal job at all. These guys are like very good at what they do, and they take pride in it.
It's kind of like with any form of lying. It's just kind of like you don't want so-and-so to find out because you think that they'll be upset about it. But it's like, if they're going to find out anyway, it's just going to look worse because then you hid it from them also. So probably just tell them because they're going to find out anyway. And when they find out and you didn't tell them, then you're screwed.
I've heard Ken say here before, and I used to say it all the time to candidates, you might lie about something that would not have got you DQ'd, but because you lied about it,
right
now your ass is DQ'd. That happened. Yep. I mean, how frustrating is that, Ken? When you look a candidate in the eye and you go, just be straightforward.
All right. So honesty is a big deal. And the issue has been talked about in another podcast with Christine and I. We did a whole hour on lying and denying and all that. You lie, you die. So go listen to that episode. So we don't spend another hour talking about it right now, but we're going to just go ahead and move on to some of this other stuff. The second one on our list is respect for the law. And Christine, if I was to ask you a standard respect for the law, what do you think that is about?
Oh, geez. I think it, like, when you hear that, it can be interpreted in multiple different ways. Like having respect for people, like law enforcement officers, but also like in your past, having respect for the law. Like, does your past history display that you have a respect for the law? So maybe not too many, run-ins with the law, or too many instances of arrest. Instances where you've displayed where you've broken the law in the past, maybe stolen something, or I don't know, used drugs, drank underage, things like that, where somebody would be able to find that out and be able to display that you don't have respect for the law, because how are you going to enforce it if you don't respect it?
Yeah, Steve's nodding his head there.
Yeah, it can even be minor stuff. Like I'm sure this annoyed you too, Ken, when you see like people who just keep speeding, or they just keep getting stop sign infractions or carpool lane infractions. It's like, and then you go back to when the background investigator will undoubtedly always look back at their own career or their own life and go, when I was trying to be a cop, I was trying to be squeaky clean. I wouldn't even jaywalk. You know what I mean? It's like, here you are, you've been pulled over 10 times for speeding. Like
and you don't learn the lesson.
Yeah, it irritated me. It's like, geez, if you really think that doesn't matter, wait till you get a badge, because you're going to really think you're above the law then. I mean, now you got a badge in your pocket to show, like you're going to be, if you don't respect the law now, I always felt like, starting off in that foot was always, it's just an indicator that and it's a maturity thing too. It's like, you're just not getting it,
Yeah. And so respect for the law, Christine, you kind of hit a lot of it, is that respect for the law includes everything that has to do with the law. So a lot of people think respect for the law, I've never been arrested or anything, but respect for the law is like Steve said, a traffic ticket. You're not respecting the law because you're speeding, or you're going into the carpool lane with only one person or something like that. Anytime a background investigator can hit you up that you failed to follow the law, and that's a respect for the law issue, or under that standard, and it covers a lot of things. And of course, it covers being arrested.
Right.
So,
and even things like nowadays, walking around and saying like a cab, or, things like that, where you don't respect people that enforce the law either. So how are you supposed to get in that line of work and do that, or respect others that do? So. Yeah.
And Steve, let me ask you a question. I'm going to test your background knowledge.
Oh boy.
Can a candidate who's been arrested in the past for a felony or misdemeanor or anything, can they still be hired?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me some examples of when a candidate can be arrested and even convicted and be hired.
Yeah, there's the great saying I learned, or the thing I saw a lot at backgrounds, was time and distance. Mm-hmm. So if you have enough time from an event that happened and it's not, and you didn't repeat it, and it was a one-off, it seemed like within the standards that could be allowed.
Like you were right? Like you were far enough removed and you learned the lesson, kind of thing.
Exactly. Like, so something happened and five years went by, and I'm not going to give it any of the minimum standards for the agency, because it's kind of something they keep secret. But say you did coke, or you got arrested, you had coke on you or something like that, but then there was nothing else. If you had time and distance from that, agencies nowadays are letting that slide, because they realize that you literally have a different brain when you're 21 than when you're 35, let's say. You know what I mean? So, and that's what you mean, Ken? Like, that type of.
Yeah. Well, let me ask Christine. What if you get convicted for drunk driving? That's pretty bad, man. Can you get hired as a police officer, be convicted of drunk driving, DUI? Can you?
I think it depends. I don't have the experience that you guys do, but I think it would depend. Like Steve said, that makes a good point about like being far enough removed from it, but being able to display that you've learned the lesson. Because they want people with life experience, but with that comes negative life experience. And if you're able to kind of prove that you've learned those lessons, then I don't know, maybe that's a good thing if you can prove to them that.
So you want to be able to go tell a candidate, hey, I know where you've been. I've been arrested for drunk driving too.
We're like brothers.
We're like brothers. I'm doing you a favor by arresting you now.
Yeah, I think it would depend. I don't know.
Steve, can you come back from a DUI arrest, a misdemeanor DUI arrest?
Oh boy, you're really stretching me in this one. I think you can. Yeah, it's a misdemeanor. I believe you can. I think there's a certain amount of time distance needed for it.
Yeah, you can. Just with LAPD, it's a common knowledge that if you get arrested for a DUI, you have to have 3 years distance from the conviction.
There's certain things, Ken, that are just the nail in the coffin. Like I think like domestic violence and weapons violations, stuff like that. I think are like, what do they used to call them when you're DQ'd forever? Lifetime
perm
like
DQ.
black or like blackballed or whatever.
No, not blackballed. Blackballed with nobody will hire you because of something.
Yeah.
I think it boils down to like tying back into honesty. Like what we talked about is like, I've always heard that they're not looking for perfect people. They're looking for honest people. So if you're able to kind of disclose that, and with all the factors aligning that, like, it's far enough removed, you can prove that you learned the lesson, you were really young and dumb when it happened, that you would have better chances of still pursuing that career with that specific agency. But I think it would obviously depend on your background and everything else considered. So
yeah. So basically, respect for the law. You can come back from some of the things, but it usually relates to legal issues. Like what Steve was saying, there are some things you can come back from, and some things you can't come back from. Some agencies you can't come back from domestic violence. Some agencies, amazingly, you can. Battery. If you get arrested for slapping your brother around and then you get convicted of it, they're probably not going to perm DQ you for that. But if you get convicted of hitting your parents, just different things. So it depends on it. But basically, respect for the law has everything to do from getting a traffic ticket to smacking somebody to going to jail. But one of the things I'm gonna hit up Steve again on this.
Oh boy, I'm in the hot seat here.
Steve, tell me, with regard to respect for the law, a felony charge versus a felony conviction. How are most agencies going to look at that? Can you get hired from a felony?
Oh yeah. I mean, you can. I know for LA you can, but there's a certain amount of time needed between that, and it definitely depends on what the felony is, because some things amount to a felony that don't have to do with.
Right. You could have like felony speeding. That could be, right?
You can.
I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
Maybe what is Arizona?
Maybe that's just what I meant.
Felony speeding.
You can like that if it's felony speeding. If it's like I think it's like 20 miles over the speed limit, then that's like beyond. It's not just 5 or 10. I'm fairly certain that that's a thing here.
Like
that's crazy.
Wow.
That's
like negligent operation or something, they make it a felony.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. But yeah, I know there are felonies you can.
Let me Google it.
you can come back from. I don't know the classification of all of them, but yeah, there is. That's my answer, Ken. I'm sticking with it.
I think with most agencies, if you get convicted of a felony, do not apply. If you got a felony conviction, don't apply. We've had people that have done that, and felony convictions are anything from ADW, assault with a deadly weapon, stealing a car, whatever. If you have a felony conviction, there's no point in applying. Now you can get a felony arrest and only get convicted of a misdemeanor. So those
Yeah.
would be taken one at a time.
That's what I was thinking about.
So it turns out there's no felony speeding; it's criminal speeding.
I was going to say, because I think in some states, if you go like 100 miles an hour, that's a misdemeanor, like reckless driving or something. But
Yeah.
that
Class
was
3
good.
misdemeanor or criminal speeding alone is not a felony.
I'm going to go with felony speeding because that's crazy. I've never heard of such a thing. And a felony usually means you have to go to jail for a year or more, to prison. That means you've been sentenced to prison. So what's your thing, man? Why are you here? Because I went too fast.
I would think that maybe there's a chance that somebody could still get hired like after a felony, but maybe not after a felony conviction, depending on what it is.
Yeah, if you got a felony conviction, I don't think most agencies are going to hire you.
Just even if you're going to be a good candidate, like they don't want to even mess with that.
So from the panel, felony.
They might start messing with that because the candidates are getting.
They might have to, yeah. That's what I was going to say too. They might start doing that now because the pickings are slim.
So from the panel today, felony conviction, DQ, not DQ.
DQ.
Probably. Oh, felony conviction. Yeah. DQ.
Felony arrest, DQ or not DQ?
Probably
Not
most
necessarily.
likely a DQ, but yeah, not in all cases.
It depends. It depends on what the conviction status and everything that was, because police departments are going to arrest you for the highest charge. So it may not be, a felony in the sense that you think it is. So I think that respect for the law, just remember, respect for the law is a big deal, because that means, and it could be also, Steve, I don't know if you remember this. Remember the flagrant parking ticket violators? You're in college and you've got racked up 15 parking tickets. That's respect for the law. That's a DQ.
Yeah.
Because you absolutely don't respect the law if you've got a bunch of parking tickets on your record.
Some college students will argue though that they're stupid parking tickets because it's not the law, it's the law of the college. Like the 20-minute parking spots or the 2-hour parking spots.
Which wouldn't matter to your background investigator because you just can't follow the rules.
Seems like a personal issue with Christine.
No, I didn't want to pay for a parking permit. It was like $700, so I just took the shuttle to school. It's a good way to avoid it.
$700 for a parking permit?
Yep.
That's highway robbery. Robbery.
You want to talk about breaking the law?
I'll tell you. What do you guys think about mature judgment? I mean, there's Steve, you got some stories. I know you do. Mature judgment. What is mature judgment? Mature judgment can be cow tipping, or the guy that lived in a rural area and him and his buddies jumped in the car and took a baseball bat and killed every mailbox along that rural route.
That sounds familiar to me.
It's just so messed up.
How about mooning people in the car next to you? Mature judgment.
Yeah, it's mature judgment can be. It can they can stack the charges on you as a candidate. It's something they can slap on for a lot of stuff because it just applies to a lot of stuff. A mature judgment
does.
It just is like an additional charge on your ass. But we had a lot of candidates that had that problem. Like even that was one. I dealt with a candidate who was in a relationship with like a crazy woman, crazy girl. We've all dated someone crazy, like just someone who just freaks out and calls the police on you or does this stuff. And I had a candidate that broke up with this person and then got back together with them, and cops got called and nothing happened. But it was like, it just was in addition to other things that was on this person's background, where it was like, and you're with them now. Like, this is the person that's like, you can just see through your, you have some experience and knowledge. You're like, this isn't the one. And she is now ruining your chances here because, this is a ticking time bomb, this one. And it's just, that's a mature judgment thing. That's something kids do, stick with the crazy girlfriend or boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think just in that sense, like kind of measuring out the things that you've done that would kind of fall under that blank. Yeah. It would just be like tick marks against you. Like, oh, there's 3 instances of what I think it would matter to the, like to the degree that they were bad judgment, or to the like the level of how many of these do you have in your past that we can kind of chalk up to this? Would be like if you have 3 of them, may not be that bad if you were at such and such age. But if you have like a history of that repeating, that might not look too good.
Yeah, I had a kid that was like street racing a lot. Like he was racing his buddies. It was like, what are you doing? You're like street racing? Like 6 months ago, you were street racing? It's like,
Yeah,
stupid.
There's a lot of things that people don't consider. It's not just knucklehead stuff that you did when you were 14 or 15. It can be adult stuff. And so mature judgment is just exactly what it says. You can't, there's a time when you can do knucklehead stuff, but if you're doing knucklehead stuff like a year before you apply, that's probably not going to work for you.
Yeah.
So, but our next one is respect for others. Respect for others is huge. And Steve made a comment about it before. Respect for others, like domestic violence. And respect for others. Also, Christine, you brought up a really good point. What if you are using ACAB and you were calling cops names and things like that? That's respect for others. So anything that you can see. What about social media today? Can that be considered respect for others?
Yep, totally.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're social media is like there's so many candidates we dealt with, Ken, we're just like, I don't have that account anymore. I deleted it. They're on to us, they're like,
undelete it.
Yeah, don't delete, don't
But doesn't that look worse to you guys when
yes,
somebody just deleted it? But then but if you can't prove anything, then what do you guys do in that instance?
I think it's better to keep your account and then just delete all the weird posts that you think are weird, because then at least we can look at it,
Right.
Especially if you're getting into it with people. Obviously, you don't want to look immature to your background investigator. And that includes a lot of things that people do. We're going to get into employment after this, but things that happen at work where you get into petty arguments or things like that. Anything that has to do with respect for others. The thing about backgrounds, and I think Steve can attest to this, is it doesn't matter what somebody else did to you. If you responded like a child, you'll probably end up getting DQ'd because you look like the knucklehead.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You just reminded me of respect for others, Ken. The one I had was, I had this city official I'm not going to name, well, he was a firefighter and he was of rank and he was trying to become LAPD. And I get a call from his wife because we have to speak, his ex-wife, and we have to speak to, spouses, ex-spouses, whatever. And she was a cop. And she went off about how insanely abusive this guy is. And she never called the police, but like through going through police academy, she realized what an abuser he was and a controller, and just laid the guy out crazy. And it was so bad. I brought it to our supervisors, obviously. And I was like, the guy's like, he's like sparkling clean, except for this ex. And she doesn't seem malicious. She seems genuinely concerned about this guy getting authority.
So you guys do factor in, though, how you said she didn't seem malicious. You factor in like how you said everybody's dated like their crazy ex or whatever.
Generally,
somebody that would just be angry and trying to get back at them and like smear them.
Find a second source,
okay.
someone to confirm and I did. I found a neighbor that was like, this guy flies up there. He's got a wicked temper.
Yikes.
And I was like, oh, really? Tell me about it. And the wife had lived there with him and she had witnessed stuff. So I said, so, okay. So this looks like this actually might be a problem. He was like a captain. So that respect for others thing can be really, really dicey.
Yeah.
He never actually like the abuse never came to the point of like, her needing to call for help or call the police or even really that physical, but just psychologically the way the guy was. And, when we interview people, we get a feel for people and sometimes we feel like, person's kind of strange. Like they give me a weird vibe,
Well, it's also risky too, because it hasn't gotten to that point yet doesn't mean that it won't. Or like, what could drive him to do something that would be physical that he hasn't done before. Yeah.
Yeah, you start getting worried. I don't know about you, Ken, but as a background investigator, you start getting worried about putting your stamp of approval on somebody, Like that always, to me, it was always like, I'm going to be super cautious. And if I recommend DQ and it gets overturned, okay, I did my job. I'm not, that's it.
Right.
But if if you greenlight somebody and then they come back, Dorner or somebody, it's like, boy.
That's what sucks is, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, geez. I think that's what sucks is everybody, it's good to be cautious, obviously, period. But especially nowadays, I feel like people in a position of backgrounds or people in a position to get hired for law enforcement, it's kind of at like a weird standstill because they're hurting for people to want to do this job, I think. But then background investigators are also terrified of losing their job because of what's going on. So it kind of makes it's an interesting like dynamic there. Is trying to be like super careful and cautious to not hire somebody that could potentially be in that position. But also like, how do you toe that line between like, yeah, we need people, but how do you not lower the standard in order to get people?
Oh, yeah, Ken and I remember when someone screws up in backgrounds, it's like, all right, who did his background?
Yeah, they do.
Like,
first thing they do
it wasn't me.
Is they come back and look at the background as if the background investigator did the whole hiring process. Like, what is that? One of the things that you brought up, Christine, is the crazy X. And I tell you right now, crazy X's can sink backgrounds because it always, I mean, man, did we have so you're divorced. How did that go? Ah, man, she hates me. She hates me. Is she going to say anything bad about you? All day long. And you'll probably have to break for lunch and come back because she's got so much stuff to say about me. So my advice to people who have issues in relationships, this is respect for others, is that you want to break up very, very pleasantly. You want to break up very pleasantly, and you want to be on good terms with your ex. And that is not just people you're married to, but it also is boyfriends, girlfriends. Because I don't know what your thing was, Steve, on it, but if somebody broke up with somebody within, I'd say 6 months, I would interview that ex.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the best thing is at the end of it, when you break up with someone, you just go ahead and do an exit interview, sit them down and say, is the breakup, is there anything we can do for you on your way out
fairly
the door?
Distribute the property.
I think unfortunately, like some people, you could be the most it could be the most amicable thing. You could be the most mature person, the nicest like possible way about it. And some people are still going to be crazy, but just, definitely doing what you can to try to eliminate any factors for that is helpful.
Yeah. And that can be a big issue. And Steve was correct in that for me and for him, we just don't take one person's word as the gospel. I usually try and get someone to corroborate it. And there has to be more than one person, especially if it's a crazy person. I'd like to have one more person saying, yeah, this happened or anything like that.
Right.
But respect for others is pretty important. Also in this year that we're in, where everybody's offended by something and the law backs them. Oh my gosh, that, what about sexual harassment? And, I don't know, somebody makes a complaint about you because you misgendered them or anything like that. All these things can play into it. Although I don't think I would probably DQ somebody for a lot of this stuff, but just remember, respect for others covers a lot of different areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So going into the next one, employment. Steve, we had so many people that got DQ'd for employment issues. Some of them were DQs because they got write-ups and things like that, and they didn't tell us about it. That's an honesty thing. But what's your take, Steve, on employment issues as far as what types of things in employment can get you in trouble in your background?
Obviously disciplinary stuff. And then even like punctuality, like it really depends on your employer. Like when we worked Southern California, one of our best buddies was In-N-Out Burger. They keep track of everything. You can't have visible tattoos. You have to be creased and pressed pants, all white, any little infraction. So we used to joke, like if we get an In-N-Out employee and their personnel record for them checks out, they're good to go. They're a good hire. But little things like, just when you talk to the supervisor and it gets tricky because a lot of them don't want liability. And you try to tell them, like in California, there's a peace officer thing where you say like, hey, you can speak freely because, your business, if we hired this person and you said they were okay, but they weren't, there's some verbiage in this law. I forget the chapter and section, but there's some verbiage in this law that could come back on you. Like, you need to tell me, is this person, should they be a police officer or not? Because some places will try not to talk to you at all. But they'll tell you like, about punctuality, following orders, all those things that would relate to police work, they kind of add up. And like we said before, we try to, corroborate it with other jobs, and we take into account how long ago it was, what the job was like, what the boss was like. And, it's, you talk to the boss, and then you also talk to a couple coworkers and ask about the boss. Was he a reasonable guy? Then you kind of triangulate the whole thing, and then you get a picture of what the person was like. But I think punctuality and discipline is a big thing. And abuse of time, that's another thing where you'll get candidates say like, well, you know what? I wasn't actually sick, but I had like sick time and like everybody was doing it. So I just felt that I earned the day off. Or, well, you're lying. You weren't sick, but you took the sick day. That type of thing that people don't think is a big deal is a big deal to police agencies.
Mm-hmm.
It gets people in trouble most of the time is when they get write-ups and they don't keep track of them.
Yeah.
And then if you're a background investigator and you go and review a file and the person says, I got written up twice and they got written up 5 times, you need to keep track of that stuff because that's a DQ. You failed to disclose your write-ups. Christine, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say on top of that, like, maybe like being fired or like gaps in employment too, having to explain that, like, why were you unemployed for 6 months or a year in between these 2 places that you worked? Or
good point. Who's supporting you during that time? Where were you getting money? How are you paying for things?
Yeah. Are you selling drugs?
Exactly.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Also,
you into reefer?
One of you just reminded me of that movie Reefer Madness. Have you guys ever seen that? Reefer Madness. Reefer will make you go crazy. And with employment, there's things that people do, like they'll get unemployment, and then they'll get overpaid, and those things will go. You need to keep track of all this stuff with regard to your employment when you have gaps in your employment and things like that. Also, another big deal with employment, Steve, how many people did you do backgrounds on where they worked for someone under the table?
Yeah, I always felt for those people. They don't pay taxes, and they're working under the table a lot. And a lot of it is like family business. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I don't technically have a job. I work for my uncle. Well, I've worked for them for 5 years, and I fully support myself off my uncle's mobile car wash business. But he pays me under the table, so he might not want to talk about it. It's like, oh boy.
Yeah, because that opens up a whole can of worms, and you need to. Well, a lot of times you need to go amend your tax return if you want to get hired.
I've seen that. I remember our buddy Pat told a guy like, "Go ahead and pay your taxes for the last 5 years, then come back." It was like, ooh, yeah. Sorry.
Christine's her eyes are like big as saucers right now. Go what?
That's crazy.
That's a big deal. People don't think about getting paid under the table, but you have to account for gaps in employment and things like that, where you're getting your money. And if you've been working for somebody under the table, it's fine, but you need to disclose the income, because that is a respect for the law issue.
Yeah,
paying taxes. And the first thing the background investigator will say, well, I got to pay my taxes, so you're going to pay your taxes too.
You can see it in their face when you tell them that. They're like totally confused. You don't necessarily disagree, where you're like, yeah, good for you. Get what you can from the government. Don't let them dip into your pockets. But because we're all told that, from a young age, like, no, just do it under the table. That's the thing. But then when they're faced with like the law, they're like, oh wait, that is not legal, is it? It's like, it's not legal.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And I don't know all the ins and outs of the tax laws. I think there's a certain amount you have to make within a certain amount in a year before you have to file a tax return. I don't know anything about that. This is not a tax show, so I don't really know. But I do know that if you get paid under the table, you need to be careful with that. If you do get paid under the table, my first thing is to just go ahead and disclose it, because if you want to be a police officer, they're going to ask you about that. You have to do it.
Even if you get paid under the table, making sure that it's such a minuscule amount that it's not even an amount that you'd get taxed on. Like, I think even doing the research to figure that out, because then that covers you too. Like, maybe you're a college student, you work for a family member to get gas money or whatever. That's not going to be enough income throughout the annual year for you to have to pay taxes on it.
I made under $600, so I didn't
right
or whatever.
Yeah, and that's fine. Another thing with employment that comes and bites people back on the butt is you should go and look at the personnel files for any employer that you think you had a problem with. Because I guarantee you can have a bad relationship with an employer and you say, here's my resignation letter, and you walk out the door, and then your background investigator goes back, and in the file, this guy was the biggest jerk, insubordinate, blah, blah, blah. And so you should check out your state's laws. In California, you can check your employment file, whether you are a current employee or an ex-employee. And I don't know, and all states aren't like that. Some are you have a year to do that or whatever. But man, I would go and check my personnel files if I think there's an employer that could be a problem. You'd be surprised what people put in your file after you leave.
Oh yeah, I actually had a funny one with that, where this employer wouldn't release the records to me. So I cut and paste that law about employers cooperating with police background investigators. They agreed finally, and they sent me the kid's timesheets and how many times he was late and all that. Didn't jive with what he told me. Then, like Ken's telling you to go check it out, so good idea. Do not confront your employer, because this friggin' kid went back to his employer because he knew they were battling not giving me the records, and chewed them out and said, you're blowing my chances. What are you doing? I get in my email 2 weeks later the exact same records with his lates redacted and changed. So now I have two sets. I have the original set and another set changed to not late. This kid his father was a retired cop, and I was being visited like weekly by a captain asking, like, how's he doing? What's going on? Yeah. And he was like, oh boy, like I have to give it to LAPD. I was never pressured to get this kid through or anything. He genuinely just was friends with this kid's dad and wanted to know, how's he doing? And when this started to unravel and it just got worse from there, he's shouting at his employer to change the records and, all this stuff. It was pretty nuts. He ended up.
That's kind of funny and surprising, though, that his employer did him a solid and helped him out with that. They didn't actually end up helping him out, but they intended to, right? Like, when
employers get freaked out when they get contacted by police background investigators. They're like, either they don't want to share the records, or they are, is he going to find out that I gave him these records? Like, is there any confidentiality involved here? And some of them, it doesn't matter what you tell them. And this was like a law firm, so they were even more tweaked. There's laws about it, though, but you also typically will sign like a waiver, right? Allowing the background investigator permission to be able to seek that documentation, right? Oh, absolutely.
So you sign your life away.
Yeah, and the smart thing to do is if you think that an employer is not going to cooperate with the background investigator, go down there and get copies of anything you can get copies of to have it ready to go, because some employers will not cooperate with backgrounds. There are people that I've called up and I said, hey, I'm doing a background on so-and-so for the Los Angeles Police Department. And they go, I don't want to get involved. I said, I'm
no, thank you.
Just doing a background. I'm just doing a background.
We don't want any.
I've had people say that to me. And so whatever you can get from your employer, go for it and get it. That's important. And of course, there's other things like sexual harassment stuff, being rude to other employees, anything that could cause an issue. Plus, my best advice to anybody with regard to employment is be a model employee. Don't get into it with anybody, because it's not just what's in your record. People, they're going to want to talk to people at those employers. And if they say bad things about you, and if they get 2-3 people saying the same bad stuff about you because you were a jerk, that's not going to end well for you. That'll probably end up in a DQ.
What do you do when the employer refuses to work with you? Because that doesn't fall back on the applicant, right? It's not their fault.
Well, you can ask the applicant to go get the records.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And they have to give it to him or her.
Gotcha.
And another thing to do is, I used to do it all the time when the employers don't talk to us. I'd say, okay, get me the cell phone numbers for your boss and 2 coworkers, and I'm going to call them behind the scenes. And it's going to be a personal reference, not an employment reference. And so they would do that, and I'd get the information. There's ways to get the information, but overall, I think quite a number of employers would talk to us, right, Steve?
I feel like the vast majority would. Yeah. Some people tell you stuff where you're like, whoa, this guy's really letting it rip. Like they don't even ask for the waiver. They just start talking, and you're like, wow, okay, thank you. Very good.
With regard to the waiver too, you're going to sign a waiver, a release and waiver when you apply. And that waiver, basically, you're signing away your life. It says that the background investigator can get any information they want from anybody, and they can look at any files. And you give us permission. You're just basically signing your life away for the background investigator to look at anything they want and anybody to talk to you. Military, Steve. How can you get in trouble with the military? Serving the country. How can you possibly get DQ'd out of the military?
Oh, dishonorable discharge.
Plenty of DQs from the military, which is unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, I've had ones that were like theft of military equipment. You know, they were like, oh, we had these things on base, and Sergeant so-and-so said I could have it, and I took it, but then Lieutenant so-and-so came along and said, hey, I saw that you had this on your property. That's government owned. You can't have that. And he came and took it away. And then you talk to the sergeant lieutenant, like, no one said he could have that. He just stole it. It's like he stole that from us, and we took it easy on him, and stuff like that. The people leave the military, they take stuff with them. There's what's it called? An 11, Ken? A disciplinary
page 11, Article 15.
Page 11.
That's
right. The thing that sucks is they'll tell you they're squeaky clean, and then you get this page 11 back with all this stuff on it, and you're like, dude, you knew that this was on there. Why would you not tell me? And a lot of it's not DQable, but now they've lied. The honesty thing again. Yeah, I had a lot of military people that, I had this one that was so friggin' weird. It was one of his references told me that they went to a training it was in the Air Force. Air Force candidates seem to be the weirdest to me. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know why, but just the Air Force people just seem.
No offense to anybody that works in Air Force that's listening.
Yeah. Not you, Air Force person, but all the other techie weirdos that work there. I had an Air Force person that had like, he was propositioning other Air Force soldiers about sexual things and swinging and all this stuff. And they reported it. They're like, we're at this training. This guy wants to, have sex with me when his wife is there watching or whatever. And it's like, what? It's like she reported you, and you knew she reported you, and there was like a little captain's mass or whatever about it. And they just don't tell you. And they're like, a lot of these people think that like you're not going to get it. They're like, how many times have you just sat on a file, Ken, and been like, okay, I'm waiting for your military. You're the one that gave me the way that soldiers get their military stuff online and then can give it to you. So I actually had a nice little PDF with like everything circled and how to do it. So that Ken made, I just sent it to him. They're like, well, I talked to my staff sergeant, and he doesn't know how to get it. And I'm like, oh, really? I have this document that can tell you how. And then they're like, oh yeah, okay, online. And then you won't hear from him for 2 months.
Maybe they do weird stuff like that so often, or certain people that do weird things. They do it so often that they just like can't remember because they do so much weird stuff.
Yeah,
there are people like that, but the military, you can count on it. Is the military? They are detailed. They document everything. And excuse me, when you get a file for the military, their personnel file, I don't know the official term for it, but that has from the time they went into their recruiter and that initial application where it says how much dope you used as a teen or whatever, it's on that page. So if you're in the military and we're going to get your record, don't even bother lying about your your dope use.
Yeah, you get their little 18-year-old scribbles.
And there's all kinds of stuff in there, but their record keeping is crazy. And plus, the military's brutal when it comes to the smallest things. Like you get a ticket for speeding, it goes up to your commanding officer, and it goes up to, and you get an article.
Oh yeah. You guys look at on base speeding, dude. I asked you if you ever got a ticket for speeding. I didn't say on base or off base.
Yeah, is there a difference? Yeah, and so they are super strict, but super strict. I don't have enough spit in my mouth to say that, but yeah. So I mean, there's all kinds of things in there that they're just and Steve, I remember the military package that we would get. It'd be like 100 pages, and then maybe 3 of them we could use.
Oh,
3 of them,
yeah.
So, but you'd have to go through the whole thing to find those pages. But when you get that stuff, you'd be surprised how detailed the military is. So when you get, and the military also have military police where they do police reports if they get called out to your house or something, or you get drunk or whatever. You know?
It's very detailed. Like you said, they record everything. Like I had a page 11 on the kid that I had to really dig. It was very brief. It was about a policy. It looked like he violated a regulation. And then come to find out, talking to like a lieutenant commander, he's like, oh, he just forgot to sign the new tattoo policy. But then he signed it 3 weeks later. I'm like, and that's a page 11? He's like, yep.
Yeah.
Damn, man. You just extended this kid's background like 3 months because I've been trying to track this down, what the hell this means. And which sucks for us because he, good candidate like that could have got picked up somewhere else in the meantime, a smaller agency that doesn't go that deep, but hey, it is what it is. Like Ken said, they record everything.
Yeah. So don't, you know what, if there's something that happened in the military, just tell us about it, because you probably won't get hired if we think there's something in your military record and you can't get the copy of the military record. That's in 2021, saying you can't find your file. That's just not going to fly because almost everything is online. There's a way to get it.
Yeah.
So.
And I got like a little word to the wise too for military guys, because they can get on Facebook while they're overseas. Don't just take it easy, because you will post things in life and death situations that and word them in a way that you would not when you're trying to get a job as a cop. Because God bless these guys and gals going over there, but some of the stuff they put out there on social media when they're overseas in these situations about the enemy, about women, about men, about whatever, are like, they're just seen as either it's just racist, homophobic, or chauvinist. Mm-hmm. You might be joking, but once we have screenshots of it and it makes it into the system, it's no good. It's no bueno, as they say, Ken.
No bueno.
Or somebody's viewing it out of context or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, or even they're just talking about, Haji's or sandy buttholes. There's one I saw using faggot, like stuff like that. Like, yeah, that is not socially acceptable. Like, and it's not something people want police officers saying. It's offensive. But I get it. You're over there in these situations, and you're with your bros, and you're riding and dying, and or ride or die type situations. I think it's just very wise. Not, if you do post, just delete all those posts later because they are not good.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that's camaraderie based in the military, and in situations like that where you're in life and death situations, it doesn't translate into the civilian world. So Steve's correct. I had a candidate that was talking about his exploits in the military in the Middle East, and talking about how they were in this firefight and they killed all these guys and all that. That's, what, God bless you for serving our country, but that stuff does not translate into civilian backgrounds. No. And it just doesn't look good. If you don't get DQ'd in that type of a scenario, in backgrounds, and psych will probably DQ you because they don't want people who get excited about killing other people. That's just probably not going to do it. Steve, finances. Christine, finances.
Money.
Money.
Man.
Can money get you in trouble? Why can money get you in trouble?
It displays responsibility or a lack thereof, like in terms of whether you have debt or whether you're going to be somebody that's
in financial desperation, like you'll do anything to pay this debt off, type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. And that's important because with regard to finances, when cops get in trouble in narco because they do all these busts with millions of dollars in cash, and who's going to see that money? If they suspect that you don't have it together with your finances, and you could get desperate because you're a gambler or whatever it is, I don't know. There's a possibility you could steal money. So they look at finances in your record and bankruptcies. I've had candidates. I don't know about you, Steve, but I've had candidates with more than one bankruptcy.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And collections. If you have $1 in collections, likely you're not going to get hired.
Yeah. Or even just, a bankruptcy and then some delinquency on a credit card is like, geez, you just claimed bankruptcy. And now, you got a credit card with $500 limit is all you could get. And now you're delinquent on that. That's like that's a self-control issue. That's a problem.
So do you guys take into consideration people with student loan debt, or
if they're on time, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, the amount of debt isn't as important as you being current on it. But
Right.
if I've had candidates that declared bankruptcy or had collections and and they got a 2021 new car,
Oh yeah.
or they're in collections and you just came back from Vegas, that's just irresponsible, and it doesn't show that you're taking your financial responsibilities seriously. So finances are a big deal. Collections, bankruptcies, charge-offs. If you owe the IRS, it shows up on your credit report. All that stuff's important. So finances is probably something that they're going to have very little mercy on you for that. And Steve, I never did this, but I've known agencies that have, where when we worked for LAPD, if you were current, if you didn't have any collections and you were current, but some background investigators will look at those little symbols, or what do we call it? Those little codes on the credit report that say how long you were late and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was just concerned whether they owed money or your debt to credit ratio and all these type of things. Some background investigators will look at you had 1 and 3 and 1 and 3 or whatever. And
I remember
never
that.
did that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like you were, in December of 2018, you were late, or, they all designate something different. I'm with you. As long as I was told, as long as they're not in collections or behind currently, it's okay.
So essentially, as long as they display like an ability to pay with their current income or whatever, they would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like some guys got into it like they were like mortgage officers, well, your debt to income ratio is not really working out here.
But some agencies may do that as a rule. Another thing in finances is obviously collections, but what people don't think about, I've had candidates that I say, where's your college transcript? Oh, I can't get it. Why can't you get it? Well, they're not releasing it because I owe money. That's a collection. If you can't get your college transcripts because you owe money, that's a collection. And they go, and I've had candidates that have paid like $1,200 in back fees to the college to get their transcripts.
Yeah.
It's pretty sad, actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
that's a collection.
Parking tickets will do that. Even if you have unpaid parking tickets to a university, they won't release your transcripts.
Yeah. And without the transcripts, you won't get hired. So I'm telling you right now, if you cannot get your college transcripts because you owe them money, don't bother applying until you pay that off.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're moving down to driving history. Driving history bites people on the butt all the time.
Oh my gosh.
All the time, man. So, and there are some agencies that will, some agencies go back 3 years, some go back 5 years, some go back 7. Some agencies on your tickets go back 10 years or forever. And I've gotten calls from people that say, I've got this PHS and they want to know every traffic ticket I've ever had. I'm like, what? Christine, have you ever had that happen?
Nope.
So, I mean, there are some, and you got to do it. You got to figure it out how to, I mean, if you had so many traffic tickets, you don't remember them all, but driving history is big because you could be driving a police car at these high speeds. And if you can't drive, man, or you got drive, that's such a huge.
They're all, but wait, I'm showing you I can speed.
I can speed.
Yeah, I'm good at
drive.
it.
Because that's a huge risk management thing. Because if they go back and they subpoena your background investigating and shows that you had a horrible driving record, but you're an officer now and you killed some people during a pursuit, city's going to pay, man. So they're not very forgiving. City's going to pay, and so driving history is a big deal. And that includes tickets, accidents, at-fault accidents. If you got a lot of at-fault accidents or you have a lot of tickets, and that goes up to respect for the law, right?
Driving connects a lot of them. Respect for law, mature judgment, respect for others. I mean, employment, were you working when you did it? Like that, it can, people think it's minor, but I remember doing this one kid, a couple of his employers had remarked, he's a pizza delivery kid, and they remarked about his driving, or they got complained from customers about his driving, about squealing tires and driving and stuff. So I sat down
on the back. How's my driving? It's terrible. It's terrible.
So I sat down at Domino's, and I sat there back in the parking lot, just kind of waiting. I'd already talked to his boss. She said he was out. He'll be back. And here he comes. This little lowered Honda Civic with a huge fin on the back with an exhaust about this big around.
I picture
slides into the parking lot.
This 16-year-old kid that works at Little Nero's from Home Alone. He bumps into their statue.
That exact kid. Yeah, I'm like, that looks about right.
Driving history also includes equipment violations, like if you're a street racer and you have loud exhaust and you've got tickets for that. You've big one, Steve and Christine, tinted windows.
Yes.
Tinted windows. I've known police officers got tickets for tinted windows.
Tint tickets are big money too.
Yeah. And here's another respect for the law issue. I've had candidates had more than one ticket for tinted windows. Why? Because they got a ticket.
They don't get them fixed.
No, they do get it fixed because you got to go get it signed off, right? Then they turn right around and go get their windows tinted again.
Wow.
Oh, I know people that have a whole system, a tint guy that takes it off. They get, in Massachusetts, you have to get inspected every year. You get an inspection and then they put it back on,
Yeah. So that's something that could be respect for the law or driving. But anyways, like speeding. Have you ever gone over 100 miles? What type of tickets are you getting? And equipment, and not only equipment, but moving violations, stop signs. I tell people, if you're going to go into backgrounds, if you're going to apply to be a police officer, you drive like a little old lady. And if people get mad at you because you completely stop at the light and then you make your right turn, let them get mad at you. You cannot afford a ticket. Some agencies, if you get 2 or 3 tickets, you're out. And it depends on the agency, how long you're going to be out. But driving is one of the worst. Christine, you're a good driver, so you don't have to worry about that.
The part that makes me nuts is when people don't stay in their immediate lane. Like when they're making a left turn, they don't stay in the immediate left lane.
That's when Christine starts her road rage.
Or when they're turning right. Or when they're turning right and they don't stay in the immediate right lane. So technically you should be able to turn at the same time. But there's a meme that on Facebook was going around. It was like, share the hell out of this because nobody has any idea. I'm like, who gave you a license?
I live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest and I was driving on the I-5 freeway just today. And in my immediate area, there were no less than four state trooper cars stopping people on the freeway.
Good.
Ooh, little sting.
Well, that's the other thing. Sheriff Mark Lamb, he's so cool. He was doing like videos, like just stopping people to warn them, because people on the freeway, they don't move over. Like they just coast in the left lane, and that's supposed to be a passing lane. You're supposed to get back over. So don't do that either.
That's for people going 100 or over. Do not be in that lane. If you're going to do 90 or below, that's not cool at all. Drugs.
Just pass them and then coast back into the right lane.
We got two more things here. And drugs and alcohol. Drugs.
Yeah, party time.
I was on a podcast last week, I think, and we were talking about DQ issues on this podcast. And I told them, they were asking me about drugs. I said, drugs are the standards for drugs are the holy grail of any background unit. You will never, ever, ever get the standards.
Don't tell.
We will never tell you. So we can't go into detail about drugs.
Some agencies do straight up tell you.
I noticed that you've said that before, and some agencies have. I've talked to people from other agencies who've told me that. And you can go on their website and it's detailed right there.
Yeah, I think it depends from state.
Don't say 95 times for smoking weed. That's what you say below 95 times.
95.
Yeah, I think it's different from state to state.
Yeah. So
So look that up if you need to.
So drugs.
Yeah, that's the one that gets Kane. It's real squirrely too, because in the back of their mind, they know pot is way more acceptable now, but also they know they can't do it too many times. So they're like, well, everybody tries pot, and I tried pot, but it was only 32 times. If my memory serves me, I can't remember that well.
It was only 32.
Yeah, it's 32. Then could you give me some kind of up or down, or but then with the hard drugs, people are always a hard no. That's like, with coke and heroin or whatever, that's the poly will pop them on that and be like, well, seems like you might have done, some kind of hard drug, but I think they know better than that. But we had pretty strict rules on. There was a number for pot, and I don't even remember it, and I wouldn't share it, but it was pretty liberal. And I think the idea is that, the agency just doesn't want to think or believe that you're are or have ever been a pothead. Like they just don't want to think that. And a lot of the management and police departments are old school. These are guys and gals that pulled people out of cars and arrested them and put them in jail for pot. Like this is not to them. The legalization of weed is like mind blowing, because I've worked with some of these older guys that are like, I can't believe this. So yeah, if you're walking in thinking pot's not a big deal, it's kind of a deal. Like you can't be like, I had a DQ where, and again, it's honesty. Like so many of these things come back to honesty, Ken. Like it's just, there was a pot brownie involved, and it was like, I didn't know it was a pot brownie, but I ate it. And I was like, dude, what is this, a movie? You didn't know it was a pot brownie, but you ate it, and then you felt weird. And then he's like, well, I didn't know. And then like I talked to the host of the party, and she was like, well, they were individually wrapped from a dispensary, so I don't know how you wouldn't have known. Because now she's defensive. She's like, well, I'm not getting in trouble for drugging somebody. Like these were wrapped individually, and they said pot brownie on the top of them. I'm like, really? And then I talked to someone else at the party, and they go, no, they weren't. Like his girlfriend at the time was like, no, they weren't marked. It was a total mistake. But then Christine and Ken, they broke up. And I get a call from the girlfriend again. And she goes,
oh no.
Dun,
I
dun,
feel
dun.
terrible. I lied. He made me lie. They were pot brownies. He knew.
Actually, they were meth brownies.
Yeah, he was so high on meth. It was crazy. And he killed my dog. Yeah, just and it got so wild that it was like, dude, like I couldn't hold that against him, because now you have a jaded lover. So that is something different. And she's friends with the host of the party. So that whole thing was like, I had to have a conference like with people I worked with, like, what is going on here? But what it came down to was like, and then they ended up getting back together. So then it was like, okay, listen.
No, that's poor judgment.
This is poor judgment, maturity, possibly drugs, the whole thing together. And the thing is, I liked this kid. So I was like,
well, also not even that fact, but the fact that he hangs out with people that use marijuana or you know what I mean?
I know.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And he worked, his background was fun too, because it was like, he worked for studios and stuff. So I got to go into cool places, but, I ended up just telling him like, you need a little respite. I think you need to take a little break, buddy, because your background's crazy, like a rodeo. You've been at it for a while, and it's getting worse. And
That's
it ended up okay. And yeah, I don't want to give too many details.
It just keeps getting worse. He killed my dog.
Yeah, he's wearing my dog is a portal to another dimension. It's like, oh, I'm so high. I'm like, dude, this can't go on. So.
You got to be careful with who you hang out with too, with regard to drugs. You may never use drugs, but if you're hanging out with people who use, drugs, that makes you associated with them. And you cannot hang out with drug users and approve of it and then go arrest drug users when you get hired. Yeah. It just doesn't work that way.
Oh yeah.
Devil's lettuce.
Friends will say the damnedest things, right, Ken? They'll be like, oh yeah, they'll tell you, Ken will tell you never done drugs. And then you talk to their friend, oh yeah, he doesn't smoke a lot of pot. He can't handle it. No. He gets crazy. No. You're like, oh really? He gets crazy, huh? It's like your friends are like your worst enemies.
And one of the reasons people get DQ'd for drugs a lot is because they'll go in and they don't think about how much drugs they used, like marijuana. They'll go in and say, I used marijuana 5 times. And then at their poly, yeah, I used marijuana 15 times. Well, you're done because the discrepancy in how many times you've used it, you need to keep track. And if I was to go back and tell my very first candidate about for the background that I did on them, I'd say use a little notepad and count every time you use drugs, because the exact number is what's going to get you to pass a polygraph.
Yeah, if you don't know, just have an honest thought in your mind, because I know many a good candidate that have got confused themselves. Just don't change it. Just be like, I think it was that many, and just stick with it. Because if you start remembering stuff and then adding to it, it's like you're trying to be honest, but what you're doing is you're just making yourself look worse. So just pick a number and be like, that was it. That's
just memorize the number.
And be honest, even like, I think it was 10 times. Like,
right.
Plus or minus 10-ish.
I would probably just tell them, like, I don't know an exact number, but I can ballpark around.
Like,
such
you're too high to even remember.
Yeah.
But you have to be comfortable. You have to come up with a number that you're going to pass a poly. I know one department that would ask the candidates, how many times have you used marijuana? Was it more than 100? Yeah, probably more than 100. Was it less than 500? Yeah, it was less than 500. And then you go to their background to review it, and it goes 500 times marijuana. I'm like, what? And they say, I didn't say that. So they have this broad number that they tell you. And one other thing to keep in mind with regard to drugs is marijuana. I think I maybe know one department that's thinking about not using the federal standard for marijuana. But other than that, I don't know any agency. I don't care whether you live in Washington or Oregon or California or wherever marijuana is legal. I don't know any agency that says, oh, cool, it's legal by the state. Yeah, we're not going to count it. No, they go by the federal standard, which is illegal to use marijuana.
Yeah.
A little confusion there.
So anybody that lives in one of those states, don't go, oh, cool, it's legal now. And then start like smoking 500 times per month.
Said that. I know cops from like in-service trainings have told the instructors like, "Whoa, it's legal," and we're all like, "It's not federally illegal, dummy. I hope you aren't smoking weed."
Yeah.
Who did this guy's background investigation?
Yeah.
Stay away from weed, man, because it's not. I don't know any agency that says that that's okay, and what their standards are, we don't know. It could be one time, it could be 2,000 times. I don't know, but you're not going to find out from me.
And I think they also reserve the right as an agency, like just because their minimum standards are met doesn't mean that they can't be more strict than what's minimum required either.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be totally legal. I mean, the feds are trying to legalize marijuana, but what if the department says you can't ever use marijuana? We don't care. Yep. Then you can't use marijuana for that department and you're going to be DQ'd for it. So let's talk about alcohol, and then we'll close this out. Alcohol can be a big deal in that if you're doing something like, I have a lot of guys Christine and Steve, that have bar hopped, and they just keep getting drunk from bar to bar to bar, and by the end of the time, they have to be poured into their car. Is it illegal? Well, you can be drunk in public. Does it look bad to be so drunk? And it depends how many times you're drunk.
Yep.
So, alcohol can get you in trouble, but it's what you do as a result of drinking the alcohol.
Yeah.
Know what? A lot of times I saw that followed alcohol. I mean, a lot of things follow alcohol, but peeing in public. And that, I mean, it's funny to say, but you can be caught up in lewd and lascivious acts. Like, you can be in trouble if someone sees you and is offended. You can battle a like level 3 sex offender type judgment on you.
Yeah.
Like, it can get bad and you're just trying to piss because you're hammered. I mean, that's
mind your own
silly to say,
business.
but it's silly to say, and even for background investigators to look at, we kind of chuckle, but then we go, well, it is kind of.
Yeah, stop getting so drunk that you have to take a piss in public.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the problem is you got caught. It's like, how dumb are you? We've all peed in public. You got caught.
What's bad is if you're peeing in public because you're drunk, but you can get a ticket for peeing in public, but if they give you a ticket for indecent exposure, that looks worse.
Yeah. Yep.
So I've had that happen at the end at ballparks where the game is over. I drank a little too much beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's more difficult for the ladies, but guys, they just kind of whip it out, go pee right there. So drinking a lot of times can get you into it can lead to problems, not generally by getting drunk, because they don't really ask a lot of questions anymore about getting drunk, because it has to do with ADA, and if you have alcoholism and stuff like that, they can't ask you about that. But the things that happen as a result of getting drunk, getting in fights, a lot of times we see people get in fights because they got in a brawl with their best friend, and we got in a fight and we kicked each other's asses, but we're such good friends now.
Yeah.
But the drinking is what got you in trouble. So
drinking just gets like, Ken and I am a cop. Ken was a cop for years. And how many of your screwed up calls had alcohol involved? Just all of them almost. Like, it's like alcohol just drives drives the bus and all of this stuff. And I can remember talking to a candidate's friends, best buddies he grew up with, and them going, oh yeah, we were drinking and having a good time. And, we're always joking around, but nothing serious. I'm like, what do you mean you're always joking around, but nothing serious? Like, he's just volunteering the information. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, we were talking about how, like, Chinese women can't drive, and how, blacks are like the overwhelming problem with the city. And I'm like, what? And so he told me that stuff. The kid said it when he was drinking. And then I got a call from the kid's aunt, who said, I'm afraid this kid's a racist. I'm afraid he's gonna, be racist as a police officer, kind of corroborating it.
Yeah. I mean, that's another, going back to one of the things, respect for others, making jokes about people because of their race and things like that. That's one thing we should really hit on that one. You should not like doing the little things that mock other races. Yeah. So just be careful about that. So, alcohol can be anything from drunk driving to getting drunk in public. I've had people that have been picked up for being drunk in public and then had to sit in the tank at the police station for, till they sobered up. This is not a good look,
Yeah.
So if you want to be a police officer, just mind your alcohol use, man, because it just leads to domestic violence. A lot of times has to do with getting drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So it's not a good look. Did we miss anything? I think this is the first time, Christine, that we've actually had a whole list of things that I didn't want to miss anything. And so is there anything you guys can think of that I'm missing as far as what can be a DQ issue? I
don't think so. I think we covered the majority of them. And if we didn't cover them specifically, I think they could fall under any of the things that we did cover.
Let's not underestimate the candidates out there, because they can create all kinds of different scenarios that can fit into these.
Yeah. So basically, do not drink and go take a baseball bat and not knock over mailboxes, and then go cow tipping, and you'll be fine.
Is cow tipping illegal? Is that a thing?
I don't even know. I've never seen
cow tipping. They would probably put it under animal
abuse. Yeah.
And that's a felony.
Yeah. That's backed up.
What about malicious mischief?
Malicious
felony?
mischief.
Yeah, that's a crime.
Yeah.
That
totally.
What doesn't fall on anything else, spray painting, all that kind of stuff can
tagging,
fall into that.
destroying property.
Cow tipping makes me sad. That's sad to think about.
Should we give it?
It is, isn't it? Like your poor cow's just asleep and
he's literally not doing anything to you. You're the worst kind of person if you do that.
Oh, when you're a kid, you don't think the same.
Can they get back up? I mean, they just gotta.
No.
They just do they lay on their little backs and they're flailing their legs like that?
I don't want to think about it anymore.
I don't know. I've only been a country cop for 4 months. I've not run into the cow chipping bandits yet, but when I do, it's going to be no mercy.
Well, this episode went on for a long, long time, so I think we've pretty much covered it. Steve, what a kick to have you here, man.
This is fun, yeah.
We're going to, and this is going to be on also Things Police See.
Hell yeah.
After Steve edits this episode.
A little difficulties going on
for our listeners. We had some technical glitches, man. I think we've hit our technical glitches for the entire year with this one episode. So we're going to piece this one together. And I keep joking with Steve that he can edit it, but I'll go and edit it. It'll come out very professionally. It'll be fine. But if there's any little hiccups that you hear, it's because I was sewing it together with masking tape and whatever to get the sound all together. It was amazing what happened, but we got it done.
I think it's good. I think it's informative. I think there's a wealth of knowledge here for people who are trying not to get DQ'd.
That's for sure.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and Christine, as always.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So we will talk to you guys soon, and thank you. And also, as a last little thing, Steve reminded me that, Christine, I haven't updated you on this, but we've got like closing in on 3,500 downloads in 2 months for our podcast.
Super sweet.
Now, listen to that, 3,500 listens, and yet I've got 21 ratings on Apple Podcasts.
Come on, guys. Sweet.
Throw us a bone, guys. Throw us a bone. The more the more ratings where people it takes 20 seconds to go in there and click the little 5 stars and all that. And then that's
the hardest thing to get, man. They are so hard to get. But this is great content. I've listened to all of your episodes. I truly enjoy it. I know people are out there listening, enjoying. There's 3,500 unique downloads. It doesn't take that much effort, guys. And let's be honest, you're listening for free. You might never donate or buy a service from the podcast, and you're getting value from it. Just take the time to do the rating, because it does help. Because when people go look, when they search law enforcement or police podcasts, they look at ratings. It's currency in the podcast world, and it's just only going to help this podcast grow. And that's what we want. We don't want this podcast to disappear. We want to keep going. So it's literally the very least you can do is just to click the 5 stars and leave a review. So I would say that.
We would appreciate it very much. Christine, thank you again so much for being here and co-hosting. I am merely carry the water for Christine.
Oh, shut up.
Steve, thank you, man. I appreciate it so much.
My pleasure.
As always. All right. Thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you all later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Police Applicant Podcast. We are the premier police background prep site in the U.S. and Canada. For more information on scheduling your police background consultation, go to policebackground.net. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes.